Awesome. We're gonna go dive right into what you guys came here for, which is the panel. So we're gonna have Nick and Mark come on up. If you guys do not know who these two guys are, you definitely should. Mark Nottingham is the co-owner of App. I know you'll probably introduce yourself, but I'm gonna give a little bit of a brief backstory for people. So Mark co-owns App Properties. He is also a commercial and residential real estate investor. And then Nick Giulioni is the owner of Off-Leash Investments and Off-Leash Construction, as he just mentioned. And then the Wilds wedding venue, and then Laurel Mill wedding venue. So we're gonna dive right in. The topic sounds like watching paint dry, but I promise it's gonna be way more interesting. So it's making an impact through real estate. And we've actually cut it into 3 segments. So 101, so think of it like a college, back in the college days, or high school. 101 is personal financial freedom. 201 is the next step up, which is bringing in your sphere. And then 301 is impacting the wider community. And then we have some extra credit, which I think are just some interesting, I guess, buzzworthy questions. So we'll dive right into it. Oh, do you want to talk?
How are you guys doing tonight? Thanks for coming out. I think Tyler took the mic 5 times from me there. Phone number's on the screen. As questions pop into your head, instead of raising your hand or shouting them out, shoot a text to that number, and if we have time, we'll get to it. So start sending in some questions that you might have for these guys, and we'll jump right in. We'll start with Nick. Tell us about your first deal.
Yeah, so my first deal was actually in Southern California, where I grew up. Couldn't afford to live in any halfway decent neighborhood, with the exception of stumbling my way into the idea of a house hack. Don't know if too many people are familiar. That is Tyler's, I think, favorite thing in the entire world, but bought a house that had a mother-in-law suite above the garage, and it ended up helping cover half the mortgage. In California, that's huge. My first investment, though, here in Indianapolis was a turnkey. I quickly realized that investing in California wasn't going to be something that I could do on the regular unless I had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of excess cash in my pocket on an annual basis. And so I didn't probably do enough research, almost got swindled by a couple of the less reputable companies out there, but got lucky and bought a turnkey out here. And now this is back in 2017. Where you could get the 1% deal on a turnkey. It was absolutely incredible. For anybody who's not familiar, that's the rent divided by the value of the house. It's kind of a back of the envelope way of determining if something was a halfway decent deal. It did not go all that well, but in the grand scheme of things, it was one of those deals that, while the cash flow sucked in the short term, it actually ended up being one of the better deals I ever did. In less than 2 years, this house that I bought for $70,000 ended up selling for $105,000, and I really didn't do much to upgrade it outside of just keeping it rented consistently. So that was kind of my first deal. Was there more to that question, or did I? Background. Yeah, background as a real estate investor. Since then, things have taken off a little bit. Tyler alluded to it. I've been doing flipping, built up a portfolio of about 60 or 70 units, 1031 some of those into a couple of wedding venues, and now run a construction company.
Thanks for having me. I'm Mark. I don't know if I'm qualified to speak at an event that's called Masterclass, but real estate has changed my life. That is without a doubt true, particularly in the last 15 years. Tyler mentioned my day job is that I help other people who are helping other people buy and sell real estate. But along the way, I've definitely become an investor. And I was laughing, your first deal was in Southern California. Mine was on the near east side of Indianapolis. So clearly very similar locations. I bought a house on Hamilton Street in St. Clair Place in 2009. This was a foreclosure that was pretty early in the wave of foreclosures that were coming online then. Was across the street from what I don't think is quite as infamous now, but the house across the street had been the site of, I think, a 6-person homicide. that was in the news. So I didn't know that, of course, until after I bought the house. Ended up owning that house for 7 or 8 years, and did a decent amount of the renovation work myself, which I learned was a bad idea. Later had contractors help me probably fix a lot of stuff that I had done. And actually now a close friend of mine rented the house from me for about 2 years and then bought it from me and still lives there. So even though I haven't owned the house for quite a while, I'm occasionally actually over at that house still, which is kind of cool.
So you still own it?
No, I sold it to him probably 6 years ago.
You just said that.
Oh, sweet. We'll keep it with you, Mark. How does cash flow play a part in the way you personally achieve your version of financial freedom? And I was going to do a follow-up of if you still own that house or not and what the equity position was, but maybe give us what the equity position still would be if you could.
Yeah, so in 2009, I bought that house for $20,000. The house would probably trade now for in the low threes. Yeah, now, granted, it's been renovated twice over that time. What I paid 20 for then would probably trade now for 150.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. I should go back and buy a few more of those in St. Clair Place. Yeah. Yeah, cash flow. We the four of us were actually chatting about this. It has been really helpful for me to think about real estate investing in these 5 specific categories. This isn't rocket science. I was not the first person to try to break down real estate in this way. There are probably more mature ways to attempt to break it down, but I've tried to analyze deals as there's 5 ways to make money in real estate. That is 1 in the acquisition, buying something for less than it's worth. 2, in some form of conversion. You're going to change the zoning, you're going to flip a house, you're going to build a property on the vacant land, you're doing something to it that increases the value. 3, which is the question here, I think, which is income on the property. 4 is depreciation, which is a tax strategy, and 5 is the natural equity gain of the market appreciation. Deals can intersect in many of those. For me personally, number 3 has always been the least important of those 5. So cash flow has not been a big part of my wealth building strategy. Cash flow is a piece of a formula for me that just has to work somehow. But real estate investing has never been the day-to-day method to make sure I can pay my mortgage and feed my kids. So as a part of wealth building, I would say cash flow has not played a role.
What would you respond to someone that would say you can't buy groceries with an equity?
Yeah, I would say if my daily living expenses were based upon real estate investment, my personal strategy would look a lot different.
Fair.
I'm buying groceries, so I think different investors have different goals with the money, and so that's why those 5 categories have been helpful, because of what my total day-to-day looks like. Number 3 of those 5 never really has to come into play much for me. For someone with a different set of goals in real estate, number 3 might play a more critical role.
Just out of curiosity, how many people in the room right now, raise your hand if you've said the sentence in the past 6 months, I just want cash flow. That's all that I'm looking for is cash flow.
The rest of you are liars.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe I should have asked that prior to Mark talking about wealth building.
No, I've said some version of that.
Yeah. So, what was that? Oh. I generally agree with most of the things that were said right there. At the end of the day, cash flow is great, and you can buy groceries with cash flow, but the ways most people actually see the greatest returns on their investment, which I think is what everyone should be focusing on. I think focusing on cash flow in the short term is a mistake. Focusing on ROI is the most valuable thing that you can do. ROI is calculated by the amount of growth or the amount of gain that you get divided by how much you have invested in every single deal. And so what I put in that numerator that we're talking about there, you've got cash flow, that's obviously an important piece. but you also get the appreciation piece, that natural and that forced appreciation that was talked about. You get the loan pay down, you get the tax benefits, and you get the inflation hedging. All of those are super, super powerful wealth drivers up there that cash flow is honestly the smallest piece. I know everybody here wants their property that cash flows $200 a month, but what I'll tell you is that, you know, I owned tons and tons of properties, and yeah, they did cash flow a couple $100s a month in those situations, but where I actually saw the greatest return was in those loan pay downs, was in the equity gain over time, which I then sold a decent percentage of my portfolio and converted that equity into cash flow. The quickest way for you to increase your cash flow is to have a significant amount of equity. If you have 10 properties, all 50% paid off, the quickest way to increase your cash flow is to go and sell half of those and pay off the other half. And so your objective, unless you have a ton of cash in the bank right now, should be to get as wealthy as humanly possible on paper and through equity, and then eventually convert that into something that's a better cash flow product.
So starting out, should real estate investment be the main goal, or should there be some sort of other income driver to give you the ability to purchase? Talk us through, like, I know your background very well, and I know that it wasn't just going and buying turnkey rental properties that could pay down themselves. There was a lot of flipping, wholesaling, different things going on in there. Walk us through how that plays into a version of cash flow as you kind of reverse engineer that.
Yeah, flipping, wholesaling, all of these active approaches, being a real estate agent, all of these active approaches are jobs. They are within the world that you're interested in, which is really cool, but those are jobs that pull money into your bank account on a monthly basis that then you can reinvest into your investments. It allows you to have the cash to go invest in and grow your portfolio that will eventually make you rich while you sleep. Yeah. Anything to add there?
Yeah, I would, maybe the addition would be, it depends on what your personal financial statement looks like. I think it's one of the amazing things about real estate is that you can put together a 5, 10, 20-year plan that would say, okay, if I can gain clarity about what I need my net worth to be and what I need that net worth to be producing in real estate, now all of a sudden you can put a timeline on what we might call like a David Hub, right? And to say, the plan is to have the income producing. You might be self-employed, but yet cash flow quadrant, many of you have probably read Robert Kiyosaki, that the concept of being self-employed is very similar to having a job. You just have a bit more control. So there could be this period of time where you say, okay, until my net worth hits this, I'm gonna have a day job that feeds my real estate investment strategy.
Yeah.
I think that eases the pressure. I once had somebody say to me, the one way to go wrong in real estate investment is to not have time to wait it out.
That's true.
If you have time, time will basically solve about any mistake you could make in real estate. If you're banking on cash flow, you typically do not have time on your side.
Do you mind if I add one more thing? I do want to make sure everyone hears here, like, we're not saying go buy $1,000 negative cash flow deals on the regular. I think what everyone here is saying is that shouldn't be your primary metric that you're using. If you buy a deal that's negative cash flow, that could still be a fantastic deal. Like, that could be one of the best deals that any one of us has seen here, but it does inherently tie you to your job. It does tie you to your W-2. It does tie you to more active forms of generating income for a little while until that ends up turning and your equity converts into something that's more cash flow positive.
All right, I love that discussion. We're gonna bump it up though to 201. So if that was kind of entry level, all focused on you, maybe your family, this is now a step up thinking about the next level, which is bringing in your sphere. So I know someone in this room, and maybe there's more people in this room, that actually offer their investments as an investment vehicle to their friends and family. They raise private capital, which is their down payment to go buy 5 to 20 properties, because they offer themselves really as that investment vehicle. We're not necessarily going to talk about that specific example, although we could. But the question I have for the panelists is, do you offer any of your personal real estate as an investment vehicle for your friends and family. How do you navigate that? How has that gone for them and for you?
Yeah, every deal requires three things. One, it requires a deal. You actually have to go find something that makes sense. It requires cash, and it requires hustle. If you can bring two out of the three, you can almost certainly get a deal across the finish line. And so what I've done throughout my entire career is I've found the deal, and I've brought the hustle, and the money has followed. And so what that's generally looked like from my perspective is private lending from friends and family. That's been wildly successful for me. I didn't have to go ask people though. And I essentially went out there and I talked about what I do on a regular basis, and other people wanted to get involved. So that's one thing that's been successful both from a family and friends perspective. The other thing that I've done is I've gone and I've found deals that were too complicated for me to take down by myself. And I've brought in equity partners a couple of times from a family perspective. And that's gone very, very well for them. They still hold them. I actually have one of the family members in town right now who's visiting her property. So that's pretty cool. I do partner with friends occasionally. Occasionally they'll bring me the deal, and that's a cool opportunity to bring some capital and bring some hustle to take those down. Hell, I do business with my friends on a regular basis. Makes it more fun. I don't think I would enjoy this business if I wasn't working with people who I have fun with.
Can I ask you a question, which is, do you prefer raising the debt to just fund your cash out of pocket and then maybe some of the rest is institutional money? Or do you prefer, hey, jump in and you're gonna have a piece of the pie with me and then have no debt? What would you generally lean to?
I'm more of a fan of debt. I'm a control freak. And when you have an equity shareholder position, they have control of part of the decision making. You have to run things by people. When it's debt, yeah, the entirety of it is sitting on you. You are responsible for the outcome. You're responsible for getting that person paid back, but you also have 100% of the control. And so I definitely have situations where I'm an equity partner with people. And I actually had a situation today where I made an executive decision that might have upset somebody, and I had to calm that one down a little bit. So I'm more of a fan of debt personally.
I would be definitely in the camp of partner with people. Perhaps friends and family might be the right fit for you. I have really valued partnering with people. It's a good way to diversify and risk mitigate. But I think more than that, it's been educational for me. I could point to any deal that I've done with someone else. Surely I can draw something from their perspective, their knowledge, their resources that I didn't have. And I think that helps me on the next one. I also really like the way that you laid that out about the three things that are needed. I'll admit that 2014 me, 10 years ago, probably didn't understand how valuable the deal and the hustle were to a good investment. So therefore, I didn't have the confidence that I could have had to get more capital from other people. 2024 me would say, well, there's plenty of people in this room that would say this. 2024 me would say, if you have the deal and the hustle, and you stood up in this room, you'd probably have 20 people call you the next day and say, well, I've got the capital. Show me the deal and what the hustle looks like. I'm not trying to make that sound easy. I think that's a really good way to illustrate that.
Mm-hmm. How has it gone for you when you're, say, a decade into your partnership and maybe a lot of the weight's falling on you as the real estate guy with the preparing for the taxes, the making the hard decisions on the capital expenditures? Does that grind wear on you? How have you mitigated against that?
Okay, so for me personally, most of the times where I have had partners outside of, say, my brothers, so I have two older brothers, we're very closely partnered in all of the real estate that we own. Most of the times when I have partnered with people, it's on deals that have clear exits. Mm-hmm. They're investments, acquisitions, developments, conversions. It's likely not a property with a 20 or 30 year hold. I'm not saying that doesn't work. I'm just saying in my own experience, the way that I've mitigated that is the further away the partner feels from me in alignment and trust, the more likely I want to partner with them on a deal that has this clear path to exit. It may or may not go as we had planned, but we know how and when it ends.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. No, I think I think partnerships for flips, partnerships for, hey, you've got a 2 or 3 year time horizon make a lot of sense. But yeah, when you've got kind of an ambiguous time horizon where, who knows, somebody might have a kid and need the capital. Somebody might have a divorce and need the capital for that. That's where a little bit of uncertainty comes there. And that's where I've had my biggest issues on partnerships.
Well, I love the advice from Mark to set an end date. Maybe it's 5 years, we're going to reassess this and anything's on the table. I think that's just a really smart best practice to do for partnerships. We're going to flip it over to Max for an audience question.
Yeah, one of the best questions that I saw texted in was defining ROI versus ROE and breaking it down how that plays in part with both partnerships and individual investments. So at what point does ROI matter? At what point does ROE matter? What the heck are those different letters put together? And what am I talking about?
All right, I'm going to start rambling. I'm going to give the rest of the panel here time to come up with something a little bit smarter than what I'm probably going to say. But
Buckle up.
yeah, I think ROI is really important in the short term. It's your plan before you get started on that investment vehicle. It's in your year 0, year 1, that's where you're focused on ROI. And again, getting back to how that's calculated, that's all the wealth drivers we talked about: cash flow, appreciation, loan pay down, tax benefits, and inflation hedging, all divided by the capital you have invested in that deal. So lots of ways you can kind of reduce those and juice those numbers, but for the sake of conversation, that's how that is calculated. ROE is a different metric. And so, in year 2 and year 3, the equity that you have in that property is both going to be whatever's invested and whatever that change in value is over time. And so I do believe ROE is probably the more important metric, particularly if you're sitting there with partners or something like that who may be trying to evaluate what they want to do with that capital, that wealth that's tied up. We've been talking about wealth here this entire time and needing to convert that to cash flow eventually. So I would say after that year 1, it's when ROE is kind of a relevant metric in my mind, but I'm totally open to having my opinion changed.
This is a good question. A concept that my brother has taught me, he's really good at this. I think this has been good in our real estate investment, is to constantly think of yourself as both a buyer and a seller for any piece of real estate that you own. Because if you wanted to sell a piece of real estate that you own, you could sell it tomorrow. There's a number of people in the room that would buy it from you. There is some value that you could immediately liquidate. And that I think this concept of ROI might cause people, if they hang on to it for too long, to own a piece of real estate that they ought to move. Right? Does that make sense? So if you're focused on my investment in this is what the dollars that I have invested, well, eventually that's actually not true. Your investment in that property is whatever it's worth, whatever minus whatever your debt is, right? Your equity in the property is your investment. If you could do better with that equity, then you should be a seller. Does that make sense? So think about, am I a buyer or am I a seller? Maybe the best way to illustrate this, I can remember the house. My brother wanted to sell a house that we had owned, and I said, well, hang on a second. Let's look at the spreadsheet. Look at how good we're doing in cash flow or ROI on this. And I said, hang on. If that house, the house might have been worth $300,000. If that house was for sale today for $300,000, do you think we should buy it? I said, well, no. Why don't we sell it for $300,000? That's the concept of constantly being a buyer and seller. I think that helps to force you toward the ROE calculation.
Yeah, I heard it once that when your cash on cash becomes less than your ROE position, take all emotions out of it, sell the property, forget about it, and move on. Because it's lived its purpose you've made the most cash flow, the most return on your cash as possible because your equity position is so grand.
Yeah.
What would your response be back to that, Nick?
I think I need Excel to break that down, but no, I think that that generally makes a ton of sense. The one other consideration that you have to keep in mind is, generally speaking, you're going to have some level of transaction cost, given that real estate is a pretty illiquid investment. So you are going to be giving up.
A realtor, for example.
Yeah.
Is one of the transaction costs.
Yeah, no, I think realtors are amazing. They sell all my properties, but in the grand scheme of things, you are going to take a 6 to 7% haircut in those transactions. So that is another piece of the calculation that you need to be thinking about, is that that you are going to have some transaction costs when you do that. So your equity probably needs to have grown at least 6% of the value of the house for it to be a worthwhile thing to do.
Fair. I think that's a fair answer. I just threw that on you out of nowhere. We'll move on to 301, and this is all about your community. The first question is talking about the news. Are all real estate investors just out to get rich and ruin communities? How can we actually turn that narrative, be redemptive in the investment that we're doing, pour into the community? I'm excited to hear Nick talk about this from distance. I'm really excited to hear Mark talk about this from being as planted as you are in the community. What can we think about to be thoughtful as we move into the marketplace to make a true impact and difference in our investments?
Yeah, this is a great topic. Look, real estate gets a bad rep, and I think to some degree, real estate investors should be able to acknowledge that that's not out of nowhere. There's really good reasons that real estate ownership in the economy gets the reputation that it does. I don't think it's totally fair. I think most of the time when a reputation is kind of laid on an entire industry, it's way oversimplified. So I would start with that. But I would challenge people. We do something in the brokerage once a year where this is kind of one of the subtopics. If someone's perspective is that real estate investment is a tool of the kind of uber wealthy, the billionaires, the 1% or less of the population, I'd say two things. Number one, that's not actually backed up by facts. A significant portion of the real estate in the United States is owned by middle-class people. Particularly if you're dividing that out by parcels, like what percentage of parcels in the United States. If you're dividing it out by dollar volume, the 1% owns more of the real estate, but by parcels, it's actually a fairly wide subset of our nation that owns real estate. But the second thing I would say is, well, you as a conscientious person have a decision to make about whether to engage or not engage. And if every conscientious person that wants to utilize and see real estate ownership as a positive in a community, if they all decide, well, that's not what real estate is, I'm not going to engage, who owns all the real estate? Follow the logic there? If every conscientious person that is concerned about real estate purely being an exploitation doesn't own real estate, that abnormally skews the ownership of real estate to people that will not be conscientious. So I don't view this as a given. Real estate is not by nature exploiting. Real estate is also not by nature generous and impactful in a positive way. I think it depends on who owns it. So that's a challenge that I would give to people. I want to hit on number two, but I'll pass to Nick first.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that any better. That is, that's a really tough thing. And yeah, we all get a bad rap out there. But in the grand scheme of things, the majority of my portfolio is sitting in entry-level housing. It's sitting in $1,200 and under rentals. And I think that there's a ton of opportunity to create incredible homes for people, not be a slumlord, work with incredible property managers like T&H to make sure that that you've got a product that is safe and is good for people. And I'll actually say I actually don't think flippers are necessarily the bad actors that they're given in a lot of situations. In a lot of cases, the houses that are going out there and getting flipped are dilapidated. They've got squatters in them. They've got people doing drugs in them. Like a flipper going in there, securing that property, making it nicer for the next homeowner is actually giving a gift to the entire neighborhood in a lot of cases. They're going out there, they're getting the bad actors out of the area, they're raising the local value, so local people in the area actually have better comps, so their wealth is building over time. I think that there are tons of opportunities towards the flipping side that can help communities. And then, tons of investors out there are doing incredible things like buying houses, fixing them up, letting their friends get on the property ladder, letting their tenants get on the property ladder and build equity over time. There are tons of ways to do good. And yeah, there are ways to be exploitative, and I don't think anybody in this room is looking to do that.
Yeah, I want to level set in preparation for question number 2. There are many people out there, including friends of mine, that think what this group is here talking about is an evil thing, is a bad thing for society. And number 2, just because you're raising the rents, you're pricing people out, you're making it more unaffordable by developing or overdeveloping. I'm very curious about question number 2, which is, does flipping and developing new homes, potentially more expensive homes, hurt residents of the existing community?
Yeah, I can't even come up with an argument how developing new homes hurts people. It creates more housing inventory, it potentially hurts the people who live there already. I guess from a perspective of more supply means less price in a lot of cases, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think we have an undersupply problem. So I'm not really going to engage with that argument. And then, yeah, like I said, flipping goes and improves neighborhoods. It makes them safer in a lot of cases. And in the grand scheme of things, for most people here, I assume if you bought your first home that you're going to be living in, you probably aren't qualified to do a whole lot of those renovations yourself. You probably don't have a ton of capital to go and improve that house that's dilapidated if you were going to buy it yourself. So a flipper's going in there, delivering a final product, and then lending products exists that allow you to get in there for a low down payment without having to come out of pocket for tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work. Yeah, I think they're doing a huge benefit to the community.
Usually if somebody asks me a question about gentrification because of what I do in my day job, I'll ask them how much time they want my answer to cover, and I'll ask them to define the term. I think the word in some ways has changed its meaning. I think still, if you look it up, the word was originally intended to be a positive connotation word that just describes the increase in development and value in a particular area. The actual definition of the word now looks a little bit more like displacement. Like when it's used, that's often what people mean, is the changes in a neighborhood are in some way through economic or cultural forces displacing people. I'm not saying those two concepts aren't related. That's a pretty complex conversation in my opinion, but they're very different. So I think for me to answer the question there would take a lot of time, but I would just point out a couple things that I think is good to remember as a conscientious real estate investor. Number 1, the concept of a static neighborhood is a myth. The concept of a static neighborhood is a myth. Neighborhoods do not stay the same. They change. That's what they do. That's particularly true in urban environments. They just change. So then, if you take as a given that a neighborhood is moving in a particular direction, do you see how that might change your opinion about whether the investment of dollars to improve real estate in that neighborhood is good or bad? I think that's an important assumption, that the static neighborhood's a myth. Number 2, there are some really good conversations happening about the difference between economic and cultural gentrification. There is a narrative that would suggest increasing property taxes is the main driver of displacement. You'll just have to trust me on this because we don't have time or the context for me to prove this to you. The research that's been done on this has convinced me that cultural gentrification is actually a way bigger factor in displacement than economic gentrification, which would mean increasing property taxes. There's also some really good conversations happening at the state level about ways to mitigate economic gentrification if it is happening. Okay, last thing I'll say on this. I think this idea about improving a particular piece of real estate having a negative impact on neighbors in some way, I think there's these like two sides of this conversation that just like won't talk to each other. We could really dive into that, but my take on it is I wish they would talk to each other. Because I think they both have some valid perspectives, but they're looking at this so simplistically that they just don't talk. So I feel pretty passionately about this because of what is or is not happening in urban Indianapolis. Like look, we could, boy, I said it was the last thing I was gonna say. We're in Riverside. Like if there's a neighborhood right now where there are two very different areas. This is a neighborhood where I'm involved in investment in this neighborhood. And I know there are great people who I respect, conscientious people that are offended that I'm involved in investment in this neighborhood. My hope is that more and more and more we can talk to each other about that. Because then I think conscientious real estate investors and longtime residents in a neighborhood have a better chance of seeing eye to eye on some things. So I keep talking, but I'll shut up.
Well, we're going to go back to you for question number 3. I don't know if there's anyone, I'm not trying to blow sunshine up your shorts here, but I don't know if there's anyone who is more qualified possibly to answer number 3 in this local community, because you talk to so many realtors, you've obviously had a long-standing realty practice. The fact is housing is completely unaffordable. In the 1980s, it cost 1.5, 2 times your median income. You could save up, buy a home. It was the American dream. Question number 3, is that dead? You know, housing is not affordable. The median home is $253,000 in Marion County. I just checked the stats. That's in Marion County, way higher in other counties. That's 7.22 times the median income here, which is $35,000. How do we tackle this? What is your take? I mean, what are you doing to help? Are you doing anything to help?
I often wonder how aware Indianapolis as a metro is about affordability issues, because it's been one of our strengths as a community. So how does Indianapolis compete with other cities nationally for the last several decades? Well, affordability is one of them. So that's kind of become a part of our DNA. That's changing. Tyler referenced the Marion County median. The regional median several years ago has set a record and is now firmly over $300,000, right? You see what happened in cities like, Nashville, Austin, Portland, Denver, you name them. Generally speaking, they didn't see it coming. So I think number one is, as a city, I'd love to see us recognize that affordability is increasingly an issue here. A couple suggestions I would make to real estate minded people about like, what can you do to address affordability? Number one is accept the fact that you can't change market forces. One individual is not going to change the fact that we have an affordability crisis coming. I would actually say we're probably already there. So accept that. But then decide, am I going to engage? Because I believe it's the right thing to do. And while I can't change the market forces, if enough people engage, you really can make a difference on this. So I'm going to give you 3 things. Number one, if any of you ever end up in a place where you could influence the thought about zoning and in particular density, this is a massive issue. Indiana does not yet understand this application of supply and demand, our zoning code exacerbates the affordability issue. Because generally speaking, Indiana views density to be a bad thing. If I have to hear somebody, and I apologize, I don't mean to be offensive. If I have to hear somebody complain about parking issues in downtown Indianapolis, I really struggle to be patient with that, because we don't have parking issues in downtown Indianapolis. But our zoning code, if it were to be more favorable to dense development, more creative and open-minded about, say, like accessory dwelling units, economists have proven this over and over again, that would address affordability. Indiana's super slow on that. Most of you probably aren't going to end up in a position of influence there, but if you do, that's a big one. Number two, find a great nonprofit that engages in this work. I think it can be very rewarding. It can be a great complement to what you're doing professionally at your own investment. I'm super biased on this because Habitat for Humanity is my love in that space. So if you don't know of one, I'll just exploit the situation here and say, go talk to Habitat, and I'm happy to help you connect there. But they're not the only one. There's lots of great nonprofits in our community working in this space that could use your help. The third one, I think you can choose to be a different type of investor that views there to be multiple buckets of return in real estate investment. And so you might choose to take on a particular type of investment to do it in a conscientious way, knowing that your ROI on that deal might be low.
And you do that, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a fund that buys vacant land and distressed housing, converts it to owner-occupied at an average sale price currently at just about $200,000, just over $200,000. Most of you know, capital right now in the real estate world is gravitating away from that type of investment because it's very difficult to make money. The margins aren't good, the ROI isn't good. It's going to move toward high-end new home construction or multifamily. It's been moving towards multifamily forever. Nothing wrong with those. I'm just making the point that I think the more people with means that think about affordability, that are willing to tackle certain types of developments at a price point, you reference where your portfolio is, I think that is a big deal because I think what you said earlier is affordability is a function of supply and demand. You see how 1 in 3, the zoning leads to supply, but I also think the intentionality of capital choosing to participate in real estate investments that it might not otherwise, that does have an impact.
Yeah, I think question 3 has been answered.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that, except for I think we can all blame John Diggs and all of the lenders out there for making things less affordable.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, lower interest rates.
Yeah.
That would help.
Yeah.
Show of hands, how many people in the room right now own a piece of property, a piece of real estate, have a deed in their name?
What was the last part?
How many people own 2? 3? 4? 5? All right, we'll stop there. You guys are the winners. Let's get to some extra credit. How do I buy my first home this year, Nick?
Call John Diggs. Work with the people here that what?
Or Aaron.
Or Aaron. Sorry, I know John very well. So work with an incredible agent who is going to help you understand how your personal goals are going to be achieved by whatever that first investment is going to be. I personally think if you're currently sitting at 0 properties, the most powerful thing you can do is Tyler's favorite thing in the world, which is house hacking. If I didn't have a wife and a baby, I would be house hacking every single year, and you couldn't stop me. I think that's one of the quickest, one of the easiest, and one of the cheapest ways of getting started. If I was taking a different approach, I would go with the forced equity approach. Go find the distressed house, the vacant land, and go and turn that into something valuable, turn that into something that somebody is going to want to live in, and force that equity. And I think we're getting all indications that interest rates are only going to go down here over the next couple of months to a year. And so that's generally an indication that I know many of you are still going to focus on cash flow despite 101 here today. It's only likely to improve if you do that forced equity approach.
House hack is amazing to get to the first deed. What neighborhood?
I have to give a shout out though. I realized that I actually misspoke. My first investment property was a house hack.
Oh.
It was my first primary residence that I lived in for 3 years and then rented for 3 years.
I think it would be
Actually,
super common.
Another cool. How many house hackers out there? How many first properties? Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll just, a quick plug. Your first real estate investment is likely the hardest one. And so something magic happens when you find a way to do the first one. The second one just got a little bit easier. So I think if you're intimidated, you think, I'm never going to build a 25 unit portfolio. Well, if you don't buy the first one, you're correct.
Yeah.
Okay, you asked a question about neighborhood.
Yeah. What neighborhood should we buy the house hack in?
I don't know the suburban part of our marketplace nearly as well as I know the city. As a company, we work there, but I just personally, my own investment has always been within about a 5-mile radius of Monument Circle. But what I would say is I think you're typically looking for a neighborhood that is in the transition. You're looking for big stakeholders. If you see big stakeholders investing time and capital, that's usually a really good indicator for what that neighborhood's going to look like in that 5 to 10 year window. The house hacker might on average be looking probably more in the 3 to 5 window, which I think generally right now to the north, east, and west of downtown is somewhere in the 2 to 4 mile radius. So you could, it is almost that clear. When you chart out like what homes are trading for, you get roughly 2 miles in almost any direction, and there tends to be this kind of like ribbon. If you keep going further north, it changes really fast and gets expensive again. But I think the near west and east sides are probably still the best investment. South of downtown Indianapolis, there's actually not a whole lot of residential property for a little while. So there's good pockets there, but I'm looking close to where we sit right now, just south of 38th Street or a little bit east of Rural Street.
I mean, do people remember before Gugman House was here? Nobody went over here. Nobody was talking about this area. 16 Tech wasn't here. I can imagine if someone bought a house a block or two over, they're probably sitting at 5x, you know? So that's just a good thing to say. But Nick?
Yeah, I don't want to struggle with parking, so I'm going to go a little further away. Just teasing. No, I think that when you're house hacking, if that's the direction that you're going to go, you can, generally speaking, buy something that's a little bit less of an investment and buy more of a lifestyle. And so it depends on what you're optimizing for. And one of my best investments I've ever done was a house hack I did in Fishers. I think you can still do well there. There are a lot of older homes there. We can force some value. If I was going to do it here within the 465 loop, I would potentially look at Broad Ripple, South Broad Ripple, Devington area. Those would be places that I would personally want to live, that I do believe that there probably is inventory that would be conducive to house hacking.
I think this is very difficult to prove, but anecdotally, I think most duplexes in South Broad Ripple right now have to be selling to house hackers.
They are. The numbers don't work.
You look at the numbers and it's like, wait a minute, that's not an investment-minded person unless...
Or it's the appreciation.
It's someone that's like, oh, this is a great hybrid.
Yeah.
I'd love to live here. And the 3 to 5 year window on this looks really good as an investment. So I think it's a good word.
I think a call back to the beginning, you have to be mindful of what does that look like when I'm going to sell it? if it's in that Broad Ripple area, and to know who the target audience is going to be, which likely will be right back to a house hacker, and it'll just cycle and we'll continue. Last thing, and we'll wrap it up. If you could start it all over, I know everybody loves this question. What would you do differently, and how would you approach it?
I would buy more houses in Indianapolis between 2011 and 2015. No, I know this is easy to say, but time gives you the value of being able to be more aggressive. So I would be more aggressive in real estate investment, which is what I'm trying to do now. That doesn't mean foolish. It doesn't mean over leveraged, right? I think you, again, get back to this variable of having a lack of time, not being able to wait it out is how a deal can go really bad. So you gotta be wise, but I can look at 4 discernible phases of time in the last 15 years that investors in the Indianapolis community got skittish, or at least slower, because of a question of value. And then 3 of those times, the next phase came around and most investors were saying things like, if I could go back to 2009, if I could go back to 2013, if I could go back to 2018. You see what I'm saying? We're not yet at that one, and so I know the deals you're looking at right now are hard. Investment deals are hard right now. If there's a safe bet, it's that by somewhere around, I'm not making a prediction here, so I'll just throw it out really far. Y'all know by 2035, if we're gonna be talking about 2024 as the good old days of being able to buy Indianapolis real estate really cheap. You see what I'm saying? So that would be mine, that I would do differently.
Buy real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, just try to
Buy more real estate. Yeah. That's a fantastic answer. I think I agree with everything you're saying, except I started in 2017, so I wish I could have bought more. Sometime over a drink, you guys can get me talking about my property management woes, and so I would definitely hire a very good property manager who's there to take care of the property. You've got an incredible sponsor here today who I highly recommend. That's a big piece of it. Number 2, I'd say, is every time I made a decision to save money, it ended up costing me way more. So if you're going through and renovating the house and that furnace is at the end of its life, but it's still kicking, you should probably replace that furnace. That roof is at the end of its life, you should probably go in there and get that thing replaced. Every single time it's cost me way more in damages in the mid and long term. And then the last thing I'd say is I would sit in rooms like this. I was kind of a solo act when I started. I didn't start really networking until probably 2020 when I moved out here. So what I hope everybody hears from this is that this isn't an event where you sit down here, you listen to the 4 of us talk at you for an hour, and then you walk out the door. This is an event where you come, you get to meet other people who are doing what you're doing here in your market. You get to learn with other people. You get to partner with other people here who are bringing deals, bringing hustle, bringing capital. And I would really lean in here to some of the smartest people in the Indianapolis residential real estate market, and really kind of use that. And I just want to take a moment here to thank Tyler and Max and the entire Roots team for pulling everybody here together. Can we give it up for them here?
Quick echo, I think that's a great word. What Tyler and Max are doing here fosters conversation, and if you're intimidated about real estate investment, keep in mind that any successful real estate investor learned about it from another human being. There's no such thing as an inherent set of knowledge that a young child has about real estate investment. They learned it from somewhere. My encouragement would be, let that give you the boldness to ask them. If a successful real estate investor says no to you, that's on them. Ask the next one. And you ask a couple times, and they're gonna start saying, yes, I'm glad you asked. I'm happy to share how this has changed my life and the resources that I've looked at. So I think stuff like this is really great for that. It's an abundance mentality. I've had mentors do that for me for 20 years. So I would just say, be bold and ask people for their experience and wisdom.
Plus, all us real estate investors are narcissists.
I'm not gonna repeat what he just said.
I appreciate you guys being on here and saying those kinds of words back to us. And if anybody can walk out of this room taking one thing away, it's to learn from somebody else. In the middle of every table, we have 4 different ways that you can learn from everybody else. If you scan the QR code, there's a place to set up a call, get a consult. There's a place to invest in Roots Realty course. There's a place to see our resources. There's a place to see all the things that we've created for you guys, and you guys are in our minds and in our hearts as we create that. So I would invite you all to scan that as well. There's also like 100 people in the room. Go meet somebody that you don't know, set up a coffee, and go out there and let's buy more real estate. Can we give a hand to Mark and Nick? Thanks, guys.
Yep. That's a wrap. If you want to get another drink, we have a large bar tab, so hit me up for a ticket or one of the people in the Roots shirts. But thank you guys so much for coming, and we'll see you next time.